Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to r/MaliciousCompliance, where people follow exact orders to spite someone. And in today's episode, nightmare bosses are getting taught lessons again, guys. And one Karen boss makes a huge mistake by demoting the best employee, not knowing it's gonna destroy the company. Guys, I hope you enjoy the stories today. Hit subscribe if you're not subscribed, and as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. So at my workplace, if you're absent from work for pretty much any reason, you need to fill out this absence form. It's not an overly complicated document, but it does ask you to give a line or two describing the reason for your absence. The whole time I've been there, you've never needed to go into huge detail. It would be something like, I vomited and was not fit to work, that sort of thing. But one day, I was really sick, like really sick. Upon my return to work, I did my duty, and I filled out the form with the expected level of detail, and then handed it to HR. I then find later a fresh one put on my desk with a post-it note from my boss saying that I haven't described my illness in enough detail. Now I thought that was odd, so I asked one of my coworkers, and he told me that the whole time I was absent from work, my boss thinks I skipped out to have a mini vacation. So feeling a bit peeved at the situation, I grabbed a fresh sheet of paper. I then launched into a vivid recount of the stomach and bowel-based torment my body experienced. I described the texture of the vomit as it gushed forth, the half-digested food that rolled across the bathroom floor as I lay there in too much pain to move, and the absolute agony that all of the contractions that a body feels from multiple bouts of vomiting. I also added a passage how I had to scoop the slop up with my hands and dump it into the toilet. The whole time, my brow caked in cold sweat and my hand shaking. I didn't forget to mention the smell in detail that happens when warm vomit splashes against a hot heater, and how the pervasive stink made everyone in the house gag. I staple the recount to the form and I write "See attached" in the section to describe illness. As for consequences, well, no one said anything to me at all directly. I heard from other sources that it did make the people in HR laugh and feel ill, but I was leaving a week later, so I didn't really care anyways. Yeah, I absolutely love what OP did, but that said, I don't know where OP's from, but I'm pretty sure in a lot of places, that's not something an employer is entitled to know. Like, if you're sick, right? You should never have to disclose your medical information to anyone. And for OP's boss to reject their form and demand more detail, all because they had a hunch that OP was skipping work to have fun or something, is ridiculous. Like, power tripping much? And this person comments, I had a manager literally turn up at my house to see if I was ill. I answered the door in my dressing gown and he said, "You look like crap." My response was, "Yeah, maybe that's because I'm ill." Okay, buckle up, because this is a long one. Working in retail most of my life, I've encountered some really bad managers. As such, I know I've become a pretty petty employee, and I've served up some sweet malicious compliance in my day. This is by far my favorite story because it even has a touch of petty revenge. That said, years ago, when I was just a newlywed, I worked for an auto parts retailer. We service professional garages as well as walk-in customers. My job was a merchandiser. That meant it was my duty to keep up with displays and inventory. I checked in shipments and I put them away every day. I also put up the sales images in the windows, and when areas needed to be changed, stock moved, or new price labels put up, etc., that was my job. Those tasks didn't usually take all day. I could get them done in a few hours. The rest of my day was spent working the counter. I would answer calls, help customers, clean, and then I got to take the truck out to deliver parts to garages. Driving deliveries was the best. I could listen to the radio and have a soda and visit with clients. But I had the misfortune of working for the laziest manager I've ever known. We'll call him Lazy Manager for short. Seeing a trustworthy worker who had a good relationship with clients, lazy manager began putting more responsibilities on me. And as time wore on, my job description was forgotten. I started having to answer his emails, deal with corporate memos that came in, and running deposits to the bank when the assistant manager wasn't there. It was no big deal though. It took maybe 45 minutes at most each day, and I wasn't having to deal with the often misogynistic walk-in customers, so I didn't mind. Then came the day our assistant manager left. I can't remember if he quit or got transferred or what. It was a long time ago and doesn't matter. Well, lazy manager decides that since I'm so dependable, to give me the keys to the store, and he would start scheduling me to close so he can go home to his wife and kids. I just thought it's more hours, so I don't mind at first. And then he dangles a lovely promotion over my head. And the thought of a raise had me jumping because, as I said, I was a newlywed and we were saving to buy a house. But here's the thing. The promotion never came. I asked him straight up one day about the position, and he said I didn't have the required certification to be an assistant manager. So I was still on the payroll as a merchandiser, despite the fact that I was now opening the store every day at 6:30 a.m., closing the store at 10 p.m., making deposits, making sure all the drawers had proper change, handling emails, checking the stock, controlling inventory, making sure the store looked as it should, handling the counter, making deliveries, handling employment applications and interviews for new hires, entering the schedule, and adjusting payroll for all the employees. I was full on doing the assistant manager job with nothing to show for it, except circles under my eyes, because lazy manager was constantly changing my schedule to suit his needs. Anytime I tried to tweak the schedule to give myself even 2 days off in a row, he would come in behind me and change it, and all he basically did was cover for me on my rare days off. And that's when he spent most of his day just BSing with customers. Lazy manager's attitude nearly cost us some of our big accounts, but since I was constantly driving a delivery truck on top of everything else, I had a better relationship with most of the clients. We're in the South, even grease monkeys won't be rude to a lady. I was able to get them to keep their business with us. But you're waiting for the malicious compliance, so here it comes. One day, our store gets a major revamp. We're talking overtime, new displays, a grand reopening. It was huge. This also occurred around the same time as the big yearly week-long management conference. So that meant my hours skyrocketed. After lazy manager got back from the conference, he took off for another week to spend time with his family, leaving me in charge again. And it was pure hell. For 2 months, I practically worked non-stop. I think in a 90-day period after the grand reopening, I had a total of 3 days off. The last straw came when I opened a corporate memo reminding lazy manager that his ASE certification has never been completed, and he needs to contact them to set up a time for the test. And I thought to myself, all of this time, he wasn't even certified either. At this point, I was done. It was time to lay it all on the line. After a late night close, where I didn't get home until 11 p.m., I was back in the store at 6:30 a.m. to open. I hadn't had a full day off in 3 weeks at this point. I was doing my usual duties, getting ready for other employees to show up, when in walks lazy manager. He walks in and he says to me, "Oh hey, I just wanted to drop in to remind you to make sure you do payroll today." I respond, "Of course I'm gonna do payroll today. It's on my list." And I want to note that I'm speaking in a sleep-deprived, depressed tone because I was completely exhausted. Manager says, "Good. And I saw there's some new display materials back there. You should have gotten that done already. What have you been doing?" I respond, "We were slammed yesterday, and I had 2 guys call in sick. I didn't have time. I'll get it done." Hey listen, I've been meaning to ask you. I know we don't have anyone else asking for time off right now, and I've got some time saved up. I could really use a vacation. Hearing me say that, he cuts me off and says, "No." I respond, "What?" He says, "No vacation. No way. I need you here. My anniversary is next week, and I promised my wife that we'd go out of town." I cut him off at this point and I say, seriously, everyone else here gets to take long weekends or full weeks vacation and I'm burning out. I've been working near solid the last 3 months, including the whole weekend of my husband's birthday. He then says to me, well, I'm the boss and I get to say who gets vacation. You can have like a Sunday off or something. Look at the calendar, maybe 2 weeks from now. At this point, I'm so done with this crap. I start raising my voice and say, no, that's not good enough. I'm tired, I'm worked to the bone, I'm answering calls at my own house with our business name. Meanwhile, you get to go home every night to your wife and kids, while I'm here working 60 hours a week. I want my vacation and you are going to approve it. Either that or you sit down right now and you put in for my raise and a promotion. He says to me, you can't just make demands like that. You don't have the ASE certification anyways. I can't just hand you a promotion. You need to calm down. Gritting my teeth at this point and ready to shove that corporate memo down his throat, I say to him, just give me a set schedule and a long weekend then. I need more than 1 day off a month. He then laughs at me and says, that's not how this works. I need you here and I'm the boss. I'll schedule you when I need you. If you want a set schedule and a raise, you might as well go look for another job. Now here's a little note. I keep my keys to the store on a special keychain that I always have clipped to my belt loop. When he said that, it was malicious compliance time. I jerked the keys off my belt loop and I threw it at him. I say to him, fine, I will. Run this place your damn self. I then turn and start walking to the back door, and he screams, hey, I didn't mean that, get back here. You're scheduled to work today, I'm not even supposed to be here. Well, he probably should have thought of that before he decides to drop in on me on his day off. I'm out the door, heading to my car, just fuming, and he's at the door with my keys in his hand. He starts screaming, saying, what are you doing? Come back. I respond, what's it look like I'm doing? I'm quitting. You told me to go look for another job, so that's exactly what I'm going to do. And with that, I drove off, just leaving him in the parking lot, gaping at me like a goldfish. When I got home, he was already calling and my husband picked up. This idiot was actually asking my husband if I'd really quit, and he had asked my husband to convince me to stay, and if I could come back to work once I calmed down. I end up being contacted at home by the district manager, and I told him everything. He admitted that the ASE certification was only really required for managers, and there was no reason that I shouldn't have been promoted to assistant manager. I then brought up that I should really just lawyer up and sue them for gender discrimination. Upon hearing that, he offers me a generous severance package if I promise not to sue. I was so tired and done with the whole company that I agreed. I got my last 60-hour-plus paycheck mailed to me, and then I also got a second check for 80 hours of paid vacation. The lazy manager had to run the place by himself for a couple of days, until the district manager got him some help. But it was quickly realized that he had no idea what he was doing. He didn't last very long with the company after that. I believe he was fired not even a month after I left. You know, it always pains me to know that a place loses a great employee due to a crappy manager, and in the end, the crappy manager gets fired. But yeah, it's so hilarious how the manager knew he royally effed up the second OP walked out the door, to the point where he actually called OP's husband begging for his help. And I hope the husband just laughed at him over the phone. And guys, this is why you should always treat your hardworking employees with respect, especially in this situation where the useless, lazy manager was relying on someone else to do his job so he can collect his paycheck. So I worked 9 years at this well-known company that was a solid worldwide provider for various products. I won't name this company, but it was a division of this company I worked for. I started at this company at the bottom as a tech. I did my job well and excelled upwards, and after 6 years, I was promoted into the National Support Group, and then also excelled at this position. It was well paid and salary, which was a nice bump in pay, and the hours were great. After a year in the new position, I was promoted to a co-operator position, which I shared with another, and we were very good friends, and we got along very well. To this day, we still do lunches and we chat quite frequently. Now, I was trained up on the in-house software that runs the dispatching of techs, which was made by an in-house software developer. The software had no documentation whatsoever. There was no manual, nothing. The guy who had the position before me was leaving the company, so he took a month to train me on the software. And of course, I wrote down all the codes for all the areas, just so I don't get anything wrong, since there was no manual or instructions. He then leaves the company. Well, a year later, the developer of the software dies from cancer, so now no one but myself knows how to use this software. Because of this, taking vacations or time off was difficult. I constantly asked for a backup to be trained so they could do this job while I went on vacations, and at this point, I could only take 2 days off at a time for vacation. My wedding was coming up in 8 months, and we were taking a month-long honeymoon. I was denied every time I requested a replacement to be trained. When my cooperator and I took over the new department, it was in shambles. Our turnover for repairs was sitting around 8 days, which upset a lot of customers, due to these machines being used constantly during work hours. So we brainstormed and we came up with solutions to fix this and to reduce downtimes dramatically. We reduced our downtime from 8 days to an average of 2 days. The customers commented constantly about how much better our service was and how they were definitely happy with how the repairs were going. And that's when things start going south from this point. My manager was looking to move up the ladder, and he needs to hire someone for his position. Of course, me and my cooperator apply for this position since we know how to run this division and we think we could do the job great. We both get overlooked for manager's best friend, who had no experience in this division whatsoever. The guy was actually one of the purchasers, and he had no idea how to run the department, nor had any technical experience whatsoever. He of course gets the position, and right off the bat, this stupid idiot wants to change how we do things, to reduce the strain on the logistics group. Cooperator and myself immediately protest and oppose his changes with prejudice and vigor, though this fell on deaf ears. When he tells us to implement the changes, I refuse, and so does my cooperator. For weeks, we argue with manager's friend, which is now my manager, and he gets upset and continuously fights with us to make the changes. We again refuse. I then email his manager and explain the situation, and I pointed out that it would increase repairs and our customers would be very unhappy. At this time, we had grew the base of our customers 20-fold, and our satisfaction rating on all the reviews were in the upper 90s. Once again, everything I was explaining fell on deaf ears. At this point, manager's friend feels that I'm the instigator of the disobedience, and that week, I was called into a conference room with HR, manager's friend, and his manager. They then informed me that I was going to be demoted from operator to dispatcher due to my inability to be a team player and to obey orders. They said I was confrontational to my manager, so I said, fine with me. It meant less work and the same pay, so I'm okay with this. Now, with this job, you had certain functions of the job that you could and couldn't do. You could only do what was assigned to you for that job description. Dispatchers could only dispatch calls to techs and not assign their own calls. That was my previous job. My cooperator at the time was in charge of escalations and onboarding techs, and he didn't know the system I used to dispatch these calls. So the next day, I come in and sit at my desk. I'm waiting for calls to be put on my board, knowing darn well that there was no one now to dispatch calls to dispatchers. And after about 4 hours, I get approached by my manager's friend, asking why I wasn't dispatching calls to everyone. To which I politely said, "Remember, I got demoted. I can't dispatch as it's not part of my job description. And I don't want to be fired for doing something I'm not allowed to do." Upon hearing that, the dread on his face could be seen, as it streaks up his back and hits him full force. At this point, the guy realizes that he messed up. Of course, his manager and HR didn't know anything about this software that was developed in-house, as it had no instructions on how to use it. It was the backbone of this division's dispatching software, and without this, no calls could be dispatched out whatsoever. The news is now getting around that no calls are being dispatched, and my manager's friend's manager now enters and asks what's going on. He soon realizes as well what happened. They then call me back to the conference room and they ask me to train a replacement. Of course, I refuse. The day ends and I go home. The next morning, I show up for work on the dot and they call me back in yet again. They offer my position back and tell me to please start dispatching calls as soon as possible. Of course, I refused the promotion, pointing out key points that they brought up during my demotion meeting on why they were demoting me. I told them because of those points, I felt I had to overcome them in order to accept their promotion, and it would be a great time to focus on my abilities they outlined. They were flabbergasted and frustrated. They get upset and they tell me that I'm holding the company hostage and that they'll have to take me to court. At this point, per my contract, I am now entitled to a lawyer and they have to pay. A few days go by and of course, no calls are being dispatched. It's pandemonium, the whole system's falling apart. I finally get contacted by a lawyer, telling me that he's to represent me and he's being paid by the company I work for. He then goes on to tell me that they can't force me to take a promotion, and they also can't fire me if I fulfill my obligations of the employment contract, which was pretty easy. It was basically show up on time, take breaks at a specified time, and leave at a specified time. So I do. This goes on for a month when they're finally getting to the breaking point. Repairs are exceeding 2 weeks, and customers are canceling their repair contract due to service issues. They decide to demote me again to logistics. Now, the manager of logistics is a good friend, and he thinks this is retaliation for all these issues. So he just says to me to take a desk in the corner and do my thing, whatever I wanted, and he wasn't going to punish me for their stupidity. We end up going to court, and they present their case, and my lawyer presents mine. After 2 days, the judge rules in my favor, and he says a company can't force me into a job or doing a job I don't wish to, and this would be considered enslavement. They press the judge to have me turn over the information to run the software that runs their division, and the judge asked if I had written it down. At this point, I didn't have it. I threw it away, so I answered honestly to the judge. Though I did say I do remember how to use it and all the codes to dispatch since I've done it for years. It's become like second nature. The judge then asked if I'd be willing to write down the instructions. I politely said no, and the judge responds, "Okay, that's that then." Upon coming back to work the next day, I decide to start looking for another job. After about a month, I found a new position at another company, making about 10% more and with better benefits. The new company also agreed to give me a month off for my honeymoon, so I wrote up a resignation letter. I sent it to my manager, his manager, the senior staff of the division, and also the CEO of the company, explaining everything that went on and why I was leaving the company, and then wished them the best. That Friday, I packed up my personal stuff and left. 2 weeks later, I get a call from the CEO of the company, apologizing for what happened, and that all of this information just came to light, and that the individuals involved were terminated. Manager's friend, his manager, and the one above him. He then offered my job back, which I politely declined. The division I ran was merged into another division a year later, and it wasn't able to recover. 30% of the people that worked for that division were laid off or transferred to other divisions. My co-operator is still working for the same company, though he said that after this whole ordeal, it never recovered. It was never the same again. It had gone downhill dramatically, and he'll be retiring this year. Again, bad managers like this never cease to amaze me. Like, I just want to know the whole thought process here. Like, OP's the sole person who knows how to do the most crucial thing in the company, but let's just go ahead and demote him because we don't like his opinions, even though he knows the most. On top of that, let's sue him for not doing the job we took from him. Like, seriously, there are people who can't think past the nose on their face, and it's honestly such a beautiful thing when it blows up in their faces. As for the company never being able to recover, they deserve it, don't they? Like, how many times did OP point out that there needs to be another person that's able to do their job and was ignored? Good on OP, great malicious compliance, and a sweet, sweet revenge. Hopefully they learn their lesson. So a long time ago, when I was a teaching assistant, I used to work as a substitute teacher for very unruly classes, aka the classes that licensed teachers wouldn't accept. I had full responsibility, worked all hours, and my numbers showed that my class was making great progress. I just had some bad luck that caused me to not finish teaching college at that time. Now, because I didn't have my teaching license, my boss actually came to me one day and said to me that I was too uneducated and inexperienced to teach, and that I must have had someone telling me what to do behind me. I told her I didn't, but she didn't believe me, and she told me she'll be watching like an eagle to see if I was fraudulent, changing grades and stuff. Now, I never did anything to my students. I'm not a cruel person, and I didn't want anyone implying that I wasn't doing my job as expected. But I did start to behave like a beginner student teacher to my boss only. I would ask really stupid questions like, how can I make the class quiet? I'm clearly too uneducated to know, so can you please help this teacher out by showing it? Knowing full well that my disruptive class would never listen to her. I also called her for everything. A parent wanting to talk to me, a kid who fell down and needed a band-aid, anything. I made sure to tell her that I was way too uneducated and inexperienced to handle such a task, and that I need to observe a true professional work. The thing is, my colleagues got in on it too. They started pointing out everything I wasn't allowed to do, but expected to do, and told my boss that she was being very fraudulent by expecting me to do so. In the meantime, I was discussing gamification, the need for programming and English in primary school, showing older colleagues new teaching methods and digital assistants, all the goodies. After 6 weeks, she was done. She calls me to her office and she apologizes to me for saying that I was too uneducated and inexperienced, how she was renewing my contract and she got some budget to pay for half of my studies. I was happy to tell her that I got a new job that would pay for everything to get me my license and that I would also get full creative freedom without being watched like an eagle. This was 2 years ago. I almost have my license, and I still work at that awesome school that hired me, after the allegations of being uneducated and inexperienced at my old job. I even got a reward and a trophy from the board for doing exceptional work and obtaining goals with my students. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of r/malicious compliance. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/entitled People episode, where a psycho dad tries to force his daughter to make him a baby because he needs a grandchild. Guys, it's such a wild episode, so go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.